Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to give you an update on my 2021 Specialized Diverge Sport Carbon, including some changes and upgrades that I've made, as well as some of my future plans for the bike. And just for your reference, I've posted my initial review of the bike, as well as another video identifying 7 things you should know about the Diverge. Those videos are down in the description below. And since there's always questions about sizing, I'm 5'8", 155 pounds, and this bike is a size 52 centimeters, which fits me perfectly. Alright, so for starters, it probably makes sense to tell you that for the past 1,000 miles, I've been riding this bike on about a 50-50 mix of road and gravel. Some rides are pure road rides, other rides are pure gravel rides, and the vast majority of rides have been a mix of several sections of dirt and gravel trails, kind of all strung together by stretches of paved road. Now the single longest ride I've done since purchasing the bike has been right around 50 miles, or about 80 kilometers, and that ride was about 90% paved roads. Now I know it may not sound like a lot, but hey, I've got a wife and 2 little kids at home and a full-time gig outside of the channel. So for me, everyday epic adventures and multi-day trips are few and far between. My typical ride is somewhere between 20 and 30 miles and consists of a solid mix of paved roads, rail trails, some fire roads, and a bit of single track. So basically a pretty wide range of terrain. Oh, and before I forget, if you enjoy this type of content, then hitting the subscribe button is the best way to let me know and to make sure you don't miss out on other bike-related content like this. Now I should mention that I got the bike back in June of 2020 and it's now early November, and I live in Southern California, which means I've only ridden this bike in dry conditions. We've had 0 rain since I've got the bike, and consequently, I've been spending most of my time on the Panaracer Gravel King slick tires in 700C by 38. Now these tires have been awesome given the type of riding that I do. They're very fast on the road, which I really appreciate, yet they do surprisingly well on the dirt. I did pretty quickly find their limits off-road, as I do lose the grip in even a small amount of loose sandy stuff. But for rides that are mostly road with some gravel mixed in, these road bias tires are more than adequate. Now at the same time, I have been curious to see how aggressive a tire I can get away with while still feeling efficient on the road. So very recently, I've been on these Panaracer Gravel King SKs, which are Panaracer's small knobbed all-around type of tire. Now these have given me a noticeable bump in off-road confidence because they just grip so much better in the dirt than the slick version. Much more than I was expecting for a minimal close-packed tread pattern. Also, I'm using the 43mm width here, which is 5mm wider than the slick versions that I have, so I'm sure that has something to do with it as well. Now this bike is claimed to be able to take up to a 47mm in the 700C sizing, and I have a feeling that I'm going to gravitate towards a tire that will max out the available clearance, so stay tuned for that. On these tires though, the roads haven't felt too much slower, but there is a small but perceptible change in rolling resistance with respect to the slick version as expected. For now, I'll probably end up using these Gravel King SKs on a majority of my rides, unless it's a pure road ride, in which case I'll probably throw the slick 38s back on. Also, as we head into fall and winter, I'm sure I'll find the limits of the SKs pretty quickly and want to try something more knobby when it gets wet outside. What I do know is that I probably won't be going back to the stock Specialized Pathfinder Sports. Now I have heard good things about the Pathfinder Pro tubeless tires, but I haven't tried them yet, and the sport tires that come on this bike stock were just too stiff and tough to dial in the right pressure. In any case, as my tire collection grows, I'm sure I'll develop a better sense of the range of tires now available, which is vast. Okay, so moving on, I should mention the wheels. Now despite being the single biggest upgrade in terms of dollars spent, I have 0 regrets. I'm a big proponent of spending money where it counts on a bike, and wheels are just the best dollar for dollar bang for your buck in terms of upgrades. Now these ones here are the Hunt 35 Carbon Gravel Disc X-Wide wheels that I bought back in July, which at the time were Hunt's flagship gravel wheel at $1,000 US. These ones are 35mm deep with an inner width of 23mm and an external width of 30mm. If you have a minute, check out the video in the description down below for an initial setup and review of these wheels. Ditching the stock wheels and tires, I managed to save over 1 kilogram of weight, which has definitely been noticeable out on the road. Now Hunt has since released a newer premium gravel wheel in a 42mm depth, claiming to offer superb aero benefits on a gravel bike. Now I am curious to see how the general public responds to this new wheel, as it appears, at least for the moment, that it's kind of just another way for the cycling industry to further slice up the market and sell us more stuff. I can't argue that they do look pretty cool though. Now I think I've mentioned it in another video, but it bears repeating here. With the carbon wheels being super laterally stiff and the wide tubeless tires being much more supple than the stock setup, You might think that these are opposing properties, a stiff wheel paired with a squishy tire. However, I continue to be surprised at how they somehow work together to provide a super nice ride. Specifically, you get that sense of efficient energy transfer from the light, stiff wheels, and you just feel fast. But at the same time, all that high-frequency road chatter and the vibrations are swallowed up by the big supple tires, and it's just so smooth. Definitely the highlight of the bike, making the jump to this combo from the stock setup. Now when I get more miles on this setup, I'll put up a full review and offer more detailed thoughts on them. So moving on, the Specialized Future Shock suspension headset has got to be one of the most polarizing features on the Diverge and many of the other bikes that come with it. I kind of get the sense that people are either totally against it or completely on board with it, with not a lot of gray area in between. It's definitely a complex system, and it takes a bit of head scratching to fully understand. But I will say that once you ride on it and you feel its effects firsthand, it really is helpful in dulling out just the relentless small bumps and chatter that contribute to fatigue over the course of a long ride. Now I'm happy to report that despite taking this thing down some pretty gnarly stuff, at least by my standards, the headset is doing fine with no notable play. Still smooth and it functions just fine. I've also opened it up several times to experiment with different spacers and those little duckbill things, each time having to actually loosen the headset and then reset the preload upon reassembly. I have to say that, surprisingly, I'm actually getting pretty used to working on it. It's now quick and painless, and once you do it a few times, it's no longer a daunting task. At this point, I can confidently say that I'm a convert and that any of my initial reservations about the Future Shock's durability have entirely dissipated. Now, one of the things I complained about in my previous 500-mile review was that the anti-slip coating on the GRX levers was peeling. Almost from day one, it started to gradually become more and more stripped away. Now, for a while, I was on the fence about bringing it in for warranty. First, because I wasn't convinced that Shimano would actually replace the levers under warranty. And second, I know firsthand how long warranty claims can sometimes take in the bike world. And honestly, I didn't want to be away from the bike for that long. I know, ridiculous, right? Well, the peeling actually got pretty bad. So I called up my shop and finally decided to bring it in. Now I dropped the bike off at the shop on September 19th, and then I got a call from the shop on the 22nd with a surprising update saying that they actually got a return authorization form from Shimano, which means that at this point, Shimano had actually approved the warranty replacement, which was great. As suspected, however, the shop didn't receive the replacement parts until 2 weeks later, at which point the shop still had to install the new parts because they aren't allowed to just give the replacement parts to the customer, which for the record I would have preferred. In any case, I know how swamped all the local shops are right now, and so I wasn't surprised when it took them another week to get around to swapping out the levers for me. So really, from start to finish, the bike was in the shop for 3 weeks, which was even a bit longer than I had initially expected. Still, I know I shouldn't complain. Brand new levers for free, right? Plus, on the bright side, during this time, I was actually reunited with my mountain bike, which has sadly been starved for attention in recent months. And as you can see, I've got myself some shiny new GRX levers with grippy coating intact. Now moving on, as one of the 3 primary contact points on the bike, the handlebars can really make a difference in the feel of the ride. The stock Specialized hover bars were pretty comfortable, but I was intrigued by the shallow and flared gravel bar designs that have become really popular in recent years. These ones here that I've been trying out recently are the Ritchey Beacon bars in a 40 centimeter width, which is the same width as the stock Specialized hover bars. But these bars have 0 rise, a bit more back sweep, shallower drop, and a much wider flare at 36 degrees. Now I'm actually still deciding whether or not I really like these bars overall, but what I can say is that I do like the shallow drop at 80 millimeters. It makes switching back and forth from the hoods to the drops really natural, and I actually end up spending more time in the drops than on the previous handlebars. The one thing I'm not quite sold on yet is a huge flare. I really like how they look, and they do offer more stability and confidence when descending, but naturally the controls also get flared out, and it's fine from the drops, but on the hoods it actually forces you to reach further outward in order to access the controls. You end up kind of having to twist your wrist inward to get your fingers out and around the levers, and after a long ride it can start to get a little bit annoying. Now, the other subtle thing that isn't really mentioned in any of the gravel bar reviews that I've read, the GRX levers, and other levers I think, have this nice flattened section on the tops of the controls for you to rest your hands on while riding. It's a nice touch and it feels really comfortable when the controls are mounted vertically. The problem here is when you rotate them 36 degrees outward, now your hands are resting on the rounded corners of the hoods, and it's just plain not as comfortable, as it creates pressure points in the worst possible place, which is right up the middle of your palm where you have a couple of nerves running through. You ever notice how cycling gloves have this sort of channel in the padding right up through the middle? That's to prevent applying pressure to those sensitive nerves. Well, with the bars flared out at such an extreme angle, my hands end up resting such that the rounded edges of the hoods essentially presses right up the middle across those nerves. Now with gloves, it hasn't been too big of a problem, but I can definitely feel it after a long ride. Actually, it should be not feel it, because pressure along those nerves for extended periods of time actually contributes to numbness in the hands. Anyways, I know that 3T makes a drop bar that has a flared drop that starts below the control mounting points, such that the controls can remain vertical, but the drops still flare out. And it seems like a really awesome bar to try. The only problem is that it's a $350 carbon part, and I'm just not that curious to try them out. Now, hopefully the technology will be adopted by other manufacturers who can develop a more budget-friendly option. For now, I'm keeping these Ritchey bars on, but I may switch back to the hover bar or explore other less flared options, simply because that additional pressure of resting my hands on the edges of the hoods is actually pretty noticeable. Perhaps 36 degrees of flare is just a tad too extreme for me. Okay, so obviously this hasn't been a review like the previous videos that I've put out on the Diverge, but more of a check-in to share some things that I've experienced with the bike over the course of the last 1,000 miles. Now, I'm still standing by my claim that this is by far the best drop bar bike that I've ever owned, and I'll say it again, this bike has actually formally replaced my proper road bike. I just don't need a dedicated road bike anymore because this thing in road mode with slick tires is honestly just as fast and so much more comfortable, which, by the way, is a characteristic that I'm valuing more and more these days. And then you have the option to throw on some chunky tires and some frame bags, and you have yourself an all-day adventure gravel exploration bike thing. It's just been great. In the future, the things I'm most likely going to explore are different tires, of course, and I'll also want to get my handlebar situation under control and find one that I'm truly happy with, as I'm still on the fence about these Ritchey bars. Lastly, and this is way down the line, but I have the sense that I'm going to end up experimenting with a 1x drivetrain, simply because I think that I've convinced myself in my in-depth 1x versus 2x video that 1x will be just fine for my purposes. It's a possibility, but don't quote me on that. I am pretty sure that I'm not interested in getting a dropper post for this bike. Aside from adding a bit of weight and some complexity, I have heard that adding a dropper post results in a more harsh ride, as the compliance that's built into a fixed carbon post is lost. Also, I kind of just feel that if I'm ever in the situation where I really need to get my seat out of the way in order to make it down a descent, it probably means I should have just brought my mountain bike in the first place. I don't know though. For some reason, my wife has a video recording of me from like 4 years ago saying that I'll never need a gravel bike and that I'll always be fine with just my road bike and my mountain bike. So go figure. Anyways, thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to get involved down below. I really do reply to almost everyone, so feel free to reach out. Thanks again for watching, and thanks for subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.